you want to come up here? If you want to come up here, you can, but you can't go over there, okay? Hello, everybody. You're listening to the Deathtothescenepodcast. My name is Tim Collins. I'll be your host this episode. And this week, we're going to be looking at the debut EP released by Tetchy, a 4-piece Riot Girl band from New York. I believe from Brooklyn, New York. On February 28th, 2020, they put out their first EP, Hounds. It was preceded by 2 singles that they released in July 2019 and February 2020. And I gotta say, I really adore it. It reminds me a lot of some of the 90s influenced, not 90s influenced, just 90s feminist rock music. It gives me a lot of PJ Harvey vibes, some Slater Kinney vibes, and I believe it does a fantastic job of tackling a lot of that musical genre and rawness and emotion and applying it to modern situations lyrically. This is my cat BB. Django isn't here today because I'm not at Trevor's place, I'm at my place, but I think BB will make a fantastic replacement, even though she's mean to everyone but me. But, that happens. Look at her eyes. Right, BB? You have great eyes. Okay. So, let's start right off with the track list. So this is a 5-track EP consisting of Emotional Labor, Fascist, The Fool, Quitter, and The World. The first track, Emotional Labor, touches on, I don't think it's a recent idea in the mental health and socio-psychological realm, but it tackles the concept of emotional labor, which, if you're unfamiliar with, is an idea that everything that you're putting in to make a friendship or relationship work, the making plans, the listening, the letting them vent to you, holding them up when they feel down, all of that is valid as an effort, and it shouldn't be... You should be not compensated, obviously, but the other person in that friendship or relationship has to respect your emotional labor output. This track is about being in a relationship or a friendship that has a very unfair emotional labor balance. That's a concept that I've known about for the past few years, but I actually haven't seen it referenced very much in music. It has some really awesome lines, such as sick of growing extra arms and legs to hold you up, and sick of growing extra eyes to let you see that you're enough. And I believe it does an awesome job of taking this concept that I think is pretty prevalent, but hasn't entered really the national lexicon, and making it relevant and relatable for the average consumer of music. That's not even getting into what I think differentiates this EP from many of the others that I've heard this year so far, which is that the lyrical contents, they read like prose, but they manage the musicality of Tetchy allows it to be melodically implemented in everything that they're doing in such a fascinating way. If I'm reading the lyrics, I have the lyrics up on a screen right here just so I can reference it if I need to. When I'm reading the lyrics, I would not be able to speak to you the melody that Maggie, the vocalist, sings it in. Because when you look at it, it's not exactly written in prose, but the phrasing and melodic implementation of it, as I said earlier, is extremely unique and well done. Even in tracks such as The World, which I clicked play on instead of lyrics. Even in tracks such as The World, which has some amazing lines in it, such as, when the world tells you you're not whole, when the world tells you you're more trouble than you're worth, when the world tells you we don't know what to do with you anymore, when the world tells you, haha, you thought it would be, you thought this part would be easy, you thought it would be easy. When I read that out loud, it sounds like I'm reading slam poetry, or poetry in general. The connection between poetry and music has never been a small one, but the way that it's implemented in this EP is astounding, and it makes it that much more fascinating to listen to. Let's move on to the second track, Fascist, which is, I don't want to say it's my favorite. I can't say it's my favorite off the EP, because lyrically I think that one would have to go to either The World or Emotional Labor, but the melodic and rhythmic technique that this 4-piece band shows. Oh, I haven't said their names yet, hang on. Tetchy consists of Maggie Denning on vocals, guitar, and she's one of the lyric writers. Dylan LaPointe on bass, and he's also one of the lyricists. Jesse French on drums and vocals, and Stevie Jick on guitar. So, that's relevant, because all 4 of them are absolutely astounding musicians. They have an amazing pocket. They keep everything locked down. They're one of the few bands that I've seen in the past, few years, honestly, where when you watch them, you can see the longing and artistry just overwhelming them to the point where you know that they're going to be huge. Tracks 3, 4, and 5 of this EP are called The Fool, Quitter, and The World. And to me, these 3 tracks are best all together, even though it might be a little bit long of a listen. It's not a very long EP. Listen to the whole thing anyways. They all kind of highlight different aspects of one's relationship with the outside world and different perspectives of that relationship with the outside world. The Fool has to do a lot with the narrator's perspective of their personal interactions with the world. How it can be unhealthy, and how sometimes it's easiest to slip back into what you are used to doing when you're interacting with the outside world. Quitter is a lot more on the insular side. It has to do with the narrator's sense of self and their own reactions to how they how they respond to the things that are going on in their lives and how they handle situations. Rather than having anything to do with the interactions with others, it's about how sometimes you get so trapped inside yourself that it's really hard to burst out and ask for help from others. Track number 5 is called The World, and it has to do with the world interacting with the narrator. The World is, in my opinion, the perfect note to leave off this album. I think it was a phenomenal last track on the record, and I already read a verse from it. It's about the world not exactly telling you what you want to hear, and how difficult that can be to contend with. It doesn't necessarily say that it's going to be okay, because sometimes in life it's not going to be okay, but it's about how we recover from that. I believe that the last 3 lines of this album summarize it best. When you want to scream, but instead you whisper. You whisper back at them. It's not the most uplifting message in the world, but it doesn't need to be an uplifting message, because that's the reality of the situation. A lot of the times, if you're living with mental health and you're struggling with the world being unfair, the ability to fight back doesn't just happen. So let's take a step back and talk a little bit more about the production and recording of the album. It was recorded and mixed by Justin Pizzaferrento and Jesse French. It was mastered by Carl Saff. And I gotta say, this is a very nice record to listen to. That sounds a little hard to quantify, but it does a really fascinating job of taking some samples and other bits and pieces of things that are just pleasant to listen to, and splicing them with the music. The Beginning of the World has some studio clips that they had. There's a few other times that I can't point it out in particular, but you should listen to the full thing anyways. They are all extraordinarily talented musicians, and I don't just mean from a chops perspective. I mean that when you're watching them, when you're watching and listening to them, the emotions of their music is coming through and just absolutely blowing you away. Like I said, it reminds me of PJ Harvey, and that isn't exactly a light comparison. I don't say that lightly. PJ Harvey is one of my favorite musicians because of how she's able to capture the rawness of her emotions and portray it in such a powerful way. I think that Tetchy is absolutely a band to keep on the pulse of. I don't necessarily know if that was a phrase, but I meant what I said. So, once again, I've been talking about Hounds by Tetchy. You're listening to the That's the Review podcast. I have a radio background, can you tell? Because I felt the need to do a radio wrap-up of this YouTube video that you're watching. Anyways, you've been listening to the That's the Review podcast. My name's Tim Collins, and be sure to listen to Hounds by Tetchy. Available everywhere now. It came out last week, and I cannot recommend it enough. Thank you very much for sticking around this long.